everybody, so there will be mentions of violence, blood, gore. Like, straight up, you are not prepared for what these chapters are about to bring. There will also be mentions of anxiety/mental breakdowns. There will also be mentions of past kind of mixing in with nightmares, which is not good at all. I'm warning you about that because it gets really specific. Y'all are gonna be warned about, there's gonna be a lot of mental happening in these chapters, like a lot of just mental stuff and anxiety and all that I've mentioned earlier. It will be in almost every single chapter we are going to be reading. Hello everybody, so today we're going to be reading Not Crazy to Me /'s ex-nurse listener up in here. We're not currently on chapter 9, but for the purpose of the recap, we're going to recap chapter 9, the lockdown. Anyways, if you guys don't remember about the trauma we've recently been through, you should totally watch last, most likely 1 to 2 weeks ago series about this chapter. It is about this fanfic. It is so good. You should totally go watch it because it'll explain specifically what's going on and why we're having these purpose of this dream, but I'll summarize it. Basically, we've been essayed and close to RAP'd, and long story short, Michael and Jason saves us. So right after, like the day right after, we're having nightmares. We barely got some good sleep. We woke up with our alarm with an extra 30 minutes. We decide to visit Michael and Jason. When we go to visit them, which is, yay. But before we could go visit them, we stop along Brahms. And we're like, hi, Brahms, what's up? And then he was asking about the lights and why, if everyone's all right, especially Danny, because he cares for Danny. And you were like, everything, I'm okay, Danny's fine, it's just, a fight. And then Brahms was like, he could tell instantly that we were lying to him. And he was like, you lie. And he's like, what happened? And then we were just like in this intense thing, like, we're just like, oh shit, he knows we're lying. He might know the truth. Because we didn't want to get it out there because, quote unquote, we wanted to, like, Cole's already dealt with. We should leave it in the past now, like, trying to leave it alone now. But Brahms wanted to know what happened because he's concerned for us and wants to know if we're really, really okay because we don't look okay. And then we kind of run away from it because we don't want to tell him. And, we kind of get freaked out and kind of, like, start tearing up a little. You know what I'm saying? So we quickly went away before he could even see us cry. And he was like, well, come back. But we didn't. And we instead, like, kind of just, try to calm ourselves down and go visit Jason and Michael. Long story short, we find out that their punishment is no outside time. They get a thicker, harder cell to get out of. And they, what can I say? They have thicker chains on them. And they have less freedom. And also that there is a lockdown, but we find that later on with announcements and stuff. After we talk with them and everything, we go ahead and go to Danny because he's like, oh my god, I'm so, like, are you gonna tell me, like, what happened? And we're like, we lied to him before he gets suspicious. We're like, oh no, don't worry, I'll find information for you, don't you worry, BFF. And just after that, announcements come on and they're like, good morning, and then just kind of barely touch the subject. They're like skimming through the subject, just like, oh yeah, just a fight. Just a fight. And then Danny's like, oh my gosh, I haven't gotten locked down in years, and etc. And they're like, thank you, Ryan. And then we went to Mulaney to talk about Jason's and Michael's punishment because we didn't think it was fair, obviously. And we try to, like, talk to her, and she's like, sorry, man, they had to have the punishment. They did kill a person. And so sorry, so we could do nothing about that, right? And then even though we defended them, and we, like, made sure, like, hey, But then later on, as we talk with Mulaney, she's like, since we're on lockdown, you need to deliver food individually to everyone's cell, and that she's trusting you, and that we're like, okay, I will not break your trust, and we have to deliver food now. It's pretty long, I'm not gonna lie, but I did shorten it considerably. Anyways, let's get straight into the other chapter. Okay, y'all, so finally we is in chapter 10. They're being punished? Here, the chef sighs, pushing a long cart towards you. The cart had 2 levels, with 4 trays balanced precautiously, whatever, on top and the top and bottom. With 11 patients, the food was packed on tightly, making you anxious just looking at it. One bump and you could tip everything over. You smile bright and take the tray despite your nerves, not bothering to thank the chef. They were the one who had insulted Brahms. Turning back towards the camera exit, you head out to start dishing up the food. Your footsteps echo through the halls, and you move closer to the wall as a guard detail comes huffing past you with annoyed expressions plastered on their faces. You can't help but chuckle quietly to yourself, rolling your eyes. This lockdown wasn't that big of a deal. Speaking of lockdown, what would you tell Danny? He was still endlessly curious about the cause of all these drastic measures, and you weren't about to tell him the truth, not when the problem was already over. Maybe the easy thing to do would be to say that you hadn't heard of anything yet. You could delay the question to when you weren't busy. Oh, sorry. You take a left into the halls with the cells, smiling at Amanda as she passes by. Her eyes go sympathetic, and you inwardly groan. Here comes the comfort. Oh, YN! Amanda clicks her tongue, placing a hand on your shoulder. I heard what happened. That must have been scary. Jason, Mikael aren't usually so forward with their rage. You furrow your brows and realize what Amanda must think. You had a job to do. You begin. Thanks, I guess. I'm alright now, though. You gave your card a little push to draw her attention towards it. Her eyes light up with understanding, and she smiles tightly. Right. Sorry to hold you up. You speed away faster than she does, continuing down the hall until you stop at the first cell. This is actually the cell of the patient you probably know, the very least. This is the newest patient, Leslie Vernon, and he's at the window before you could even step in front of it. Nurse lady! He smiles and steps a few feet away from the door, hesitant for only a moment. Hesitating for only a moment, you scan your keycard and the door pops open. Good morning, Leslie. You say, would you mind stepping a little further from the door? Not at all. Leslie takes a seat at his desk, staring at you intently. Your name is Wyan, if I remember correctly. You nod your head, confirming his fact. Well, I don't think I've formally introduced myself. He stands from his seat, holding out a hand. You step away from your cart, reaching out to take it. He seems friendly enough. As your hands connect, you expect him to twist you around, snapping your arm or pressing some hidden sharp object to your throat. But he does neither. He simply gives it a gentle shake. The name's Leslie Vernon, but some stupid doctor's going to call me Leslie Mancuso. Ignore them. Well, your hands separate. It's quite nice to meet you, Leslie. You pluck a tray from its place on your cart, holding it out to him. This is yours. Hand-delivered thanks to this lockdown. Leslie takes his tray and sets it gently on his desk, turning back to you with a curious expression. I'm gonna guess you don't know any more about this thing than I do, since you're a newbie and all. He crosses his arms, glancing around the cell he's been assigned to. This whole faculty isn't as bad as I was afraid it was. Suddenly, Leslie's eyes widen and he takes a few excited steps towards you, grabbing your upper arms and smiling widely. And did you know that the Norman Bates is right next door? Wow! With a chuckle, you smile and nod. He's a nice guy from what I've seen so far. Leslie nods in agreement, releasing your arms and taking a step back. Leslie peers around you to stare out into the hallway. You have work to do, he says after a moment. I'll let you get back to it. Tell the others I said hi, and tell them I'm their biggest fan. Leslie grins too wide for you to even consider declining. With a nod and a smile half as wide as his, you drag your cart from the room and lock the door tightly once more. Next up, Norman Bates. A quick scan and a pop of a lock, and then you're pushing the door open. Norman is looking up from his place at the desk. Oh, hi. Oh my gosh, excuse me. Oh, Wyan. Hi. he says, jumping from his seat and standing stiff as a tree. When he realizes how awkward he's being, he chuckles, swiping his sweating palms on his pants before waving. What can I do for you? Just stopping by with your breakfast, you say, lifting a tray from the cart and balancing the contents carefully. This lockdown is pretty crazy, huh? You watch Norman hurry to take his food with trembling hands, a laugh just as nervous as before escaping him as he set it down on his perfectly made bed. I haven't been in a lockdown for a long time, he said with a nod. I'm not very sure of what happened. The look in his eye asked you a question. Do you know anything? But he was clearly too jittery to ask you outright. I'm pretty in the dark, too. A lie, but a necessary one. I've promised to keep everyone posted, though, so I'll come back with any news I might have. You grip the handles to the cart once more. I hope it isn't anything too bad. Norman rings his hands in front of him. He stares down at the floor, thoughtful for a moment, before his gaze returns to you. Something within it seems to have changed. His gaze seems more there than usual. I hope you trust me enough to know that you can tell me if it's something involving you. Not a single stutter. His voice was perfectly smooth, and his shaking stopped completely. His hands clasped in front of him without tremble or twitch. A moment of silence passes between you, and then Norman's normal self floods back, and he's starting to wring his hands again. Sorry, that was He cuts himself off, shaking his head. Sorry, you can leave now. His words sounded more commanding than anything else, as if he were making a demand. You smile at him, soft and caring, and wish you could say the truth. He deserved it, but you wanted Cole and everything to do with him done and out of the way. I'll see you for lunch, Norman. Your words are simple, but prompt Norman to lower his head, nodding it and gulping the lump in his throat. You swear you saw a flash of fear in his gaze. But he turned his back to you and sat down on his desk chair before you could confirm your suspicions. You exit the cell, locking the door behind you and letting your back press against it for a moment as you gather your thoughts. Norman knew something was up. That was obvious. What had happened to him? He seemed like a whole new person, and the look on his face reminded you of a mother trying to get a child to trust them. It was not necessarily scary, more just unsettling. You sigh, closing your eyes for a moment before letting them flutter open once more. Straight across from Norman's cell was the one belonging to Brahms, and then Danny's, and then Dr. Lecter's. The idea of work suddenly seemed better, and you wanted to sleep. But you had to you had dug yourself into this work pit, and now you had to get yourself through it. It wouldn't be too tough. Maybe Brahms will lift your spirits. Then you remembered your encounter with him before. You lie, he had said. And you had seen betrayal in those emerald eyes. A fear took over your body. You knew he was dangerous. Everyone was. You were hesitant to approach his door, let alone open it. You still yourself with a deep breath and push the cart towards the door. A swipe, a click, a gulp. And Brahms is waiting for you on the other side with his head cocked to the side and a ball of yarn in his hands. The fluffy strings dangling loosely and brushing the floor. You smile tightly. Good morning, Brahms. Your voice is weak and cracks in the middle, making you wince. It was just Brahms, for Christ's sake. But the look in his eye had been so intense. Good day, Miss YN, he says in his usual childish voice, taking his seat on his bed. How are you today? He plucks the knitting needles from his ball of yarn, tapping the sharp tip with his finger before looping the yarn around it and starting a row of whatever project he wanted. Not bad. You're relieved. You're relieved. Nothing seems to be bothering him. His gaze follows you intently as you maneuver the cart into the room, lifting a tray from its top and carrying it over to his desk. As you set it down on the tabletop, you don't even hear him stand up. His knitting project set aside. You turn back to face him, and suddenly his hands are grabbing your wrist, gripping tightly. He looms over you, leaning in so close you can count his eyelashes. His gaze searches your face, his brows furrowed behind the porcelain, and then this close. You can see the scar tissue around his right eye. It twists and divots like the bark of a tree. The eye on that side of his face is bloodshot. Quickly, hollow breaths puff against his mask, seeming alienistic. He completely ignores your yelp of fear, not saying a thing as he leans even closer, the nose of his mask almost pressing against yours. "Wyan?" he asks, voice high-pitched and normal. You don't answer, too busy trying to fight the urge to vomit from fear. "Wyan?" Your breath catches in your throat. That wasn't Brahms, wasn't it? The voice was deep, human, manly Brahms. Excuse me. Manly Brahms. I'm sorry. Manly. Brahms' eyes hold a sort of light. Concern. Complete, utter concern. What's wrong? Who hurt you? The voice is foreign, new. It sends a chill down your spine. The sound reminiscent of a tiger's roar, but much, much calmer. Don't lie to me. Please don't lie. You want to tear your gaze away, but you're utterly captivated by the softness of his features. You find yourself wondering, needing to know what he looks like underneath that mask. But you push the thought away, forcing your eyes to shift from his and pulling your wrist free. Nothing is wrong. No one hurt me. All you hear is the deep, disappointed sigh coming from behind the porcelain mask sitting over the face once belonging to Brahms. I have more food to get out. I'll see you later. Goodbye, Wyan. Brahms is back in all of his childness, and he sits slowly on his bed, returning to his knitting. He doesn't even bat an eye as you leave. Again, you find yourself wanting to run to your room and sleep. You are no good at lying, you guessed. You need to get this done. You forced a breath in and out again. And then a third time before you head to Danny's room. You're about to scan the card when a voice behind you steals your attention. "Nurse Ellen." You spun around, startled at the clarity of the voice, only to realize and remember the glass wall separating Hannibal Lecter from the hallways. The multiple holes meant for ventilation made his voice clearer. "Hello, Dr. Lecter." You responded with a light smile, pushing the card to his cell instead, to give him his food first. He stands at the glass with a blank expression, save for the light smile he wore. Brahms sure was giving you a difficult time for yesterday's events. Hannibal's voice is knowing, almost sly, and you immediately piece together that he knows every detail of what happened last night. How? You aren't sure, but he's a smart man, and you don't doubt his abilities for 1 second. You push the card up to the glass transfer tube, wherein only one little latch could open at a time, making a safe transfer into the cell without having to go inside. You slide your end open and lift your tray. That's one way to put it. You set the tray inside, closing your end and stepping back to place your hands on the cart's handle. I understand that you just want it to be done and over with. That's the rational response. Lecter takes one slow step to the transfer cube. But these patients really care for you and your well-being. They haven't grown so attached to a nurse this quickly before. You're special and they know it. Another step, his hands on the latch. His gaze never leaves you, and his movements are all slow, calculated, fluid. I know, I just don't want to scare them. It's a poor excuse. You're actually humiliated. Anyone would be, after going through what you've been through. Falling through such poor tricks despite all the signals your mind gave you to run. Hannibal opens his end of the tube, removing his tray and balancing it on one hand. You poor thing. He blinks slowly, taking a few steps closer to the center of the room, right up to the glass. It was foolish of me not to warn you of Cole's intentions. I did not mean any offense, but you didn't seem to listen to your instincts, Hannibal frowned slightly now, still as stone as he read your expression. You swallowed hard and licked your lips, running the back of your hand over your nose to stop the snot that threatens to drop out, alongside the tears pooling in your eyes. Yes, it was stupid of me. Those are the only words you can manage right now. In front of Hannibal's scrutinizing gaze, it suddenly softens entirely and he tilts his head. I'll make sure I warn you in the future. I've known these people for quite some time now. I should have told you that cold beat. sniffing after you like he was. At last, Hannibal breaks your staring contest and turns to set his tray on his desk, shifting some papers aside to make room. It's not your fault, and thank you. With a quick breath, you gather yourself together for the third time. It felt good to know that someone else knew what you had been through. It felt so good to know that Hannibal wouldn't shout or yell at anyone from rage or any other emotion. Now, dear, you'd better continue with your work, shouldn't you? There will be time for talking a little later. For talking at a later date. Hannibal waves his hand, taking a seat on his desk chair. I'll be seeing you, Nurse Ellen, he says, and you turn back towards Danny's room with one last farewell. Danny's excited expression pops up in the window. Stand back, Danny, you call out, knowing he wouldn't otherwise. He scrambles away, almost tripping over his own feet as the door unlocks and pops open. You push the cart inside and wave to Danny, who was now standing in the center of the room. So? He asked right away. You had hoped he would forget somehow. Sorry, Dan, you sigh, thinning your lips. No one is in a gossiping mood today. Danny deflates like a balloon, helping himself to a tray as he pouted. What a bummer. He grumbles, dropping down onto his seat and shifting his spoon through the bland cereal the patients were given today. You remember something you had been told to tell him, and even though it wasn't huge news, like a scandal about assault, it was something. Leslie wanted me to tell you he says hi, and that he's your biggest fan. Danny seems to ponder for a moment, having a mental debate on whether to stay grumpy or brighten up. He meets in the middle, sitting up straight in his seat, but keeping a bored expression. What other duties do you have today? He asked, dismissing your words, though you could see the pride in his eyes and the way his shoulders were now set. You hum and shrug. Mulaney told me that other than meals and checkups, there wasn't much else. Does that mean, as if the talking about Mulaney had conjured her, she pops into the doorway with a smile on her face, making Danny shut his mouth. Good morning, Danny. Wyan, she greets, stepping inside and keeping a close eye on the psychotic murderer picking at his Cheerios. Wyan, the police are here to take your report. Your blood runs cold. Out of the corner of your eye, you see Danny's brow furrow in confusion. Report? He asks, setting his bowl down and standing with a tilt to his head. Mallory turns her full attention to him, smiling and nodding her head. Yes, I'm sure you know that Wyan had front row seats to yesterday's incident. The older nurse took your hand, patting the top of it in a comforting manner as you went through your mental breakdown. Danny turned to you. His brows were still furrowed, his jaw set tightly. So what exactly happened? Danny pressed nonchalantly. And you wanted to speak up, to snap out of a nothing before Mulaney could expose your lies. But your throat had closed up and blocked any and all words from escaping. Mulaney seemed to have too many things on her mind. She didn't even realize the error in her ways. Most likely thinking about something along the lines of, oh, Danny and Wyan are quite close. She wouldn't mind if I elaborated a little bit. Cole made some passes at her, and when he wouldn't listen, as she declined, he took some things a little too far. Your entire body was frozen solid. He wouldn't stop, no matter what, and no one had heard her screaming for help other than Jason and Michael. Shut up, Mulaney. They broke out of their cells and, well, killed him. Lost their outside time because of it. The tension in the room seemed to snap like a rope. Danny turned his gaze slowly from Mulaney to you. There were so many emotions inside you couldn't tell any of them apart. His gaze shifted once more to Dr. Crotus, but it returned to you moments later. I really can't believe they killed him. Mulaney's words seemed to be the snapping point, or maybe it was the look of disappointment in her eyes. His voice was smooth, icy, and, well, psychotic. They're being punished for saving Wyan's life? You tell her, Danny, because, damn. Chapter 11. What kind of bullshit is that? They're being punished for saving Wyan's life? Danny's eyes narrowed like a snake, and you could already see his breathing becoming irrational. What kind of bullshit is that? Now, His scary calm is gone, replaced by a reddened face and clenching fist. He tensed his shoulders, his stance becoming intimidating and threatening. Yes, of course they are. They broke protocol and damaged their cells. That's bullshit, he repeats, and half lunges at Mulaney, a big, quick step that forces her backwards out of pure fear. Danny, calm down, you try to say, and you wanted to say more, but his withering gaze turns to you. No, Wyan, this isn't okay. Mike and Jay are innocent. You know how much Jason values his time outside. You can't take that away from him. His voice rose steadily, dripping with acid rage. His gaze returns to Mulaney, who's slowly reaching for the beeper strapped to her belt, most likely to call for backup. You have to defuse the situation before someone gets hurt. Danny, I've already spoken to them. They're just fine. Of course they said they're just fine. He snaps, spinning violently to face you and taking a step too close. They have the softest spot for you. They don't want you to feel guilty, but you should. You flinch back, hurt exploding in your chest at his words. Danny realizes his fault, but the guilt that flashes for a millisecond in his yellow gaze is rapidly overtaken by rage once more. Mr. Johnson, enough! Mulaney shouts over him, pulling the beeper from her belt loop and clicking the button to signal a guard detail. You are completely out of line. He whizzes to face her. Out of line? Was Mikhail out of line as he killed that dirty rapist? The question is a trap, and you want to yell for Mulaney not to answer. No matter her response, Danny would have the upper hand. Urgency presses in around you as the tension in the room threatens to snap. Danny. You reach out to place a hand on his arm. Mulaney is right. Your hand brushes his skin and he tenses. You're out of line. It connects. At the same instant, Danny spins to face you, pulling an arm back and bringing his hand violently across your face. You scream, losing your footing and tumbling to the ground hard. Oh my God. Danny gasps, snapping out of his funk for a moment. He drops to his knees behind you as Mulaney lets out a gasp of fear. Shit, sweetheart, He was cut off with a scream as he convulses violently. A taser stick jabbed violently against the small of his back. The rage in his eyes returns, and doubt tripled in intensity. He was on his feet in an instant, stepping around you and diving for the fork that had been delivered with his meal. Stay the fuck back, he spits, and you scramble to your feet, hands wrapping around your arms to pull you closer to safety. Danny was completely lost now. A whole new person. Put the weapon down, Johnson. One of the guards hissed, handcuffs extended and ready to click around the patient's wrist. For a moment, Danny still seethes, and then he sighs, forcing his breathing to even out and moving to set the fork down on the table. The moment his hand leaves, the guard is with the handcuffs moving forwards, but Danny is quicker. In a flurry, the fork is picked up again, and the guard doesn't even have time to scream as it's plunged deep into their neck. Shit! Another guard screams, and Mulaney grabs you, dragging you towards the door. You have to stay. You have to do something. Let go, you demand, ripping your arms free and watching in horror as the events before you unfold. 3 guards are leaping for Danny, one armed with a taser and 2 others with metal batons. The one with the taser strikes first, jabbing the device outwards. An easy sidestep for Danny. He dives for the guard's hand, gripping the wrist and bringing it down violently against his knee. With a shout and another violent hit, the taser is on the ground, and then in Danny's hand, swapped with the bloodied fork. Instead of using the device as it was intended, Danny spun to face the next guard, a woman, and brought it down against the side of her head like a bat. The hefty device sent her to the ground just as the third guard, a man, dove for Danny head on. The guard swung his baton, but Danny caught his wrist, kneeling down and ducking underneath the guard's arm, hoisting up with all of his strength to send the guard up and over, rolling across his back into the floor head first. The first guard, recovered from the blows from before, has armed himself with his own baton. They're more careful than the other 2 guards, waiting for a weak moment to strike. As Danny recovers from the tossing man over his back, the first guard swings the baton directly at the patient's head. He catches his temple, sending him stumbling over the body of the male guard on the ground. But Danny is quick to leap back to his feet with a grimace. As the female moves to attack Danny again, he dives for her, catching her chin and stabbing the taser directly into her mouth. She screams, convulsing, white foam dripping from the corners of her mouth as a horrid burning fills the room. She tumbles to the ground, dead. You scream, but hardly hear it over the thudding of your pulse in your ears. Danny, stop! Jesus Christ, stop it! Oh my gosh. That is fucking crazy. Oh my god. Your voice seemed distant to you, and to Danny as well. It seems, because he doesn't stop his skilled attacks, his gaze settles on something quite interesting that clung to the utility belt of the female guard. A knife. No! You try to move forward to intercept him. You catch his hand, but instead a hand catches you, and Melanie is dragging you backwards. They're trained for this, she claims, and you can't believe your ears. He's killed 2 of them! But Melanie is relentless, holding you with an iron grasp, and you're forced to watch as the blade is unsheathed and sliced in a sideways arc across the first guard's stomach. It's slowed by their protective gear, but still hits home and slows the guard enough for Danny to get up and dodge a baton swing. Now you already know it's game over. Danny is armed, skilled, and smiling from ear to ear as he loops onto the first guard, taking him to the ground and driving the stolen blade deep into his chest once, twice, and then pulled out and slammed through his eye socket. Danny lets out a long, loud, and hinged string of laughter as he rolls to the side, out of the way as out of a tackle from the male guard, and finds its way over to your mouth, and you realize you're crying, horrified at the death in front of you. We need more backup, Melanie hisses, and you turn to look at her. You were right. They can't take him. She grabs the beeper, fumbling to get a grip, and it slips out of her hands, clattering across the smooth ground and towards the fighting. You move to grab it, but Melanie barges in front of you, plucking it off the ground and signaling for backup, clicking the button repeatedly. Now, she has a close-up of Danny as he finishes off the first batch of guards. He tangles his hand in the man's hair, pulling it back and slamming it forwards, skewering the knife through his skull. He then pulls the knife free and tosses the guard to the ground. This feels good. He pants, shaking, heaving, giggling, and his eyes scan the massacre, landing at last on Melanie, huddled on her knees with the beeper in her hands, clicking and clicking and clicking at the buttons. His smile grows impossibly wider, and he sprints for her, slipping on the pooling blood, but wrapping his arms around her throat and pinning her to the ground nonetheless. Stop, Danny, stop! You take one step, your knees threatening to give out, and then another, and they do. You collapse to the ground with a scream of desperation, hopelessness. Melanie thrashes and wriggles through Danny's grasp, though her efforts are hopeless as he squeezes her throat with bone-shattering strength. Her face goes white, then purple, then starts to turn blue, and you can only sob on the ground, blood staining your clothing as it flows steadily outwards. Your eyes are blurred as guards file in, too many to count, prying Danny off of Melanie, who isn't breathing. As far as you can tell through the commotion, Danny struggles, hisses, spits, screams as he's restrained. He's dragged to his feet, still kicking and thrashing like his life depended on it. He's hauled from the room. Then someone is helping you to your feet. You recognize Hale and burst into tears, letting her guide you from the room and out into the hallway. Nurse YN? Hannibal's voice calls over the commotion, and for once isn't perfectly clear. It wavers the tiniest bit, and you detect concern, wiping furiously at your eyes to rid them of their tears. You glance at him, and then towards Brom's cell. The man has his face pressed to the door, and he looks like he's shaking. You can hear him sobbing, hands in his hair. Is she okay? What happened to her? Norman is shouting from his cell, pounding on the door with his fist. His face, through the window, is contorted into one of terror and rage. Melanie? Is Melanie okay? You force out, fighting out of Hale's grasp and hurrying back to Danny's bloody cell. Why stop? You're bleeding? You need to go to the infirmary. Hale shouts, a gentle hand on your arm. Bleeding? You look down at your hands, both covered in blood, and your gaze is finally caught by blooming scarlet staining the fabric covering your side. When did you... A sharp tug breaks your strain of thought, and you're being led away, trying to desperately piece together how you got this injury. You pull up your shirt to stare at the wound, and you furrow your brows, wiping at your eyes again to clear the tears. 3 diagonal slashes across from your ribs down to your hip, shallow but long and steady bleeding. You hadn't gotten those from Danny. Not a chance. Here we are, Hale says, and you cast one last glance over your shoulder towards the dying commotion. You're sat down on one of those hospital beds, and again you burst into tears, moving to cover your face with your hands and then tensing, staring at the blood of innocent people, staining your skin and your blood, and from an injury Danny must have given to you. The next 30 minutes pass in a blur. A wet rag is pressed against your face and side, cleaning as much of the blood as possible, and then people are talking to you, but you can only nod. Something about stitches and most likely the wound on your side, the mystery wound, the claw marks. You're laid down on the bed, and there's a prick in your neck. The tears slow, your brain slows. Everything slows down, and then your eyes are fighting to close despite the adrenaline and fear rocketing through your veins at warp speed. In the limbo between wakefulness and the dark abyss, you were trying to piece together what the hell was going on. When had Danny cut you? Why had everything gone so horribly? Was Mulaney okay? What would happen to Danny? That was your least favorite question. You hated the fact that you still cared for Danny, that you wanted him to be safe and unharmed, despite what you had witnessed him do. His consequences would be dire, much worse than the ones he killed for, because Mikael and Jason had reason, and only one murder on their hands. Danny had at least 4, maybe 5, for no reason. You didn't want to, you had no idea what they'd do to him, and you didn't want to sleep until you could see him again. But the throbbing pounding in your entire body was enough to make you give in, at least for now. Your arms and legs burned. The slash across your stomach stung like hellfire, and your head pounded, jackhammered like an earthquake in behind your eyelids threatening to burst from your skull. All you wanted was for this surgery to be done, and for the stitches to be put in, and that you could get to go check up on Danny, on Mulaney, on Brahms, Norman, Hannibal, everyone who had seen or been a part of this horrible turn of events. Above it all, above every other thing you wanted, the one thing reigned supreme, gawing at your insides, guilt sang a sickening song in your head, the chores being you did nothing, and you could have saved them. The song continued, shrill and repetitive, until you finally lost all grip on reality and sunk into sleep. But you weren't asleep. The hospital wasn't warm. The hospital didn't bloom and thunder like a constant heartbeat of a huge machine. The hospital didn't cast a deadly red glow from what looked like hell below your feet. No, you were not asleep, but you weren't exactly awake either. Oh my goodness. Chapter 12. Wake up. Everything was warm. Too warm. You had been here for seconds, and already sweat clung to your skull, your throat dry as sand, fighting back the urge to cough. Where were you? You scanned your surroundings, a mess of thick metal pipes crisscrossed like vines overhead. You were on a metal mesh pathway, suspended over what you could only assume to be the pits of hell. To your side, to your right, was a tall metal wall. No, one side of a massive furnace that was boiling to the touch and sent off heat in scorching waves. You took a few steps away from it, the rubber bottoms of your shoes making sticky peeling sounds whenever they were lifted, and sizzling like eggs on a frying pan whenever they were placed down again. The floor was hot, the air was thick, and the railing burnt your hand as you set it down. You pulled it away with a hiss as fear pushed its way through your chest, trying to get you to panic. But you held your breath and closed your eyes, keeping your cool, at least for now. You had to stay calm and figure out what was going on. Was this sort of dream? The last thing you could remember was the infirmary, the promise of surgery thanks to the slices on your stomach, Danny's freakout. You shudder at the memory and swallow down the lump forming in your throat. Oh no, it's who I think it is, damn it. You call out, listening as your voice echoed through the boiler room. It doesn't sound like you. It sounds weak, scared, and urgent. Imagine the urgency in your chest. Is anyone here? You call out again and set off forwards at a quick pace. Your shoes stick and hiss as they're lifted and placed down, reminding you of mud of gum stuck to your shoes. You swallow hard and open your mouth to speak again when something beside you explodes with a hiss, a sharp cloud of boiling steam blasting into your arm. You let out a scream, stumbling backwards with a few steps and out of the steam's way. Your arm stung, reddened, but it was just fine. Your nerves were fried and fear pressed in around the edges of your mind, but you took a breath as deep as the heat would allow. You couldn't pass through the steam. It was much too warm. Instead, you turned around, hurrying off the other direction. Your pace quickened ever so slightly as the urgency in your chest bloomed, spreading like fire. You were so hot. You were boiling. You move a little faster. Then you suddenly hear another set of footsteps following behind you. You whip around, expecting to see Satan himself, but no one is there. Nothing is there. You're okay, Ryan. You turn around once more, the footsteps returning. And you glance over your shoulder again. You don't see a thing. Instead of sticking around to search, you move even faster. A borderline jog down the path you hoped would lead to safety and salvation. Your breathing was shallow, stolen by the thickness of the air around you as your pace quickened and quickened. The footsteps behind you didn't slow, and before you knew it, you were sprinting onwards, throwing looks over your shoulders and seeing nothing. You knew something was there, chasing after you. Your lungs burned with the lack of air, and your head throbbed from the heat. A sudden explosion of pain erupting in your side and bringing you to a halt, stumbling forwards and down to your knees. Your hands help to break your fall, and hiss as they come in contact with the hot metal on the floor. You scream, rocking to your feet, and you place your hands on your side. To pull them away, you notice that they're covered in blood. Your blood. Your breathing quickens further as you lift up your shirt, seeing the crimson soaking your skin as the wound on your side is reopened. The footsteps sound behind you again. You had forgotten about them. You start forwards again with a scream, and you swear that you felt the phantom feeling of hands moving to grab you. Now, you're too afraid to look behind you, and too much pain to think straight with one hand pressed against your bleeding wound. You squeeze your eyes shut as you run, praying to whoever may be listening that you wake up just fine, safe, and in the hospital with all the people you care for, and all the people who are caring for you. Wake up, Wyan. It's a dream! You scream at yourself in your mind, and then you're actually screaming, wake up, God damn it! You come to a halt, tangling your hands in your hair and tugging hard, willing yourself to jolt awake. You have to. The fear, the pain, it feels so real, but it can't be. Just wake up! You jolt forwards with a wheeze, hands clutching your chest as you fight for breath. Your lungs seem constricted, blocked. With a little more wheezing, they opened up again, and the first intake of cold air is beyond satisfying. You pant, patting the bed around you in search of something. You aren't sure what it is you are looking for, but you find it. Your fingers curling around cool metal. Your eyes shut for another moment. You swing your legs over to the side of the hospital bed, still holding the unidentified object in your hand as you stand up. Now you peel your eyes open, taking in the dark infirmary around you. You look down at the object in your hand and furrow your brows. It's a fork, silver and shiny, with a slight dent in the handle. It is also coated with a dark liquid. Horror blazes through you as you realize it's slicked with blood, but before you can scream and throw it away, your surroundings shift, running away like water and washing away paint. They're replaced by bright LED lights, luminous floors, and bodies, the innocent bodies of the guards Danny killed, though this time it is you who is soaked in blood and clutching a stolen blade. Now the scream rips free, and you throw the knife to the ground, leaping over the bodies and shoving through the door. The moment you pass through, you feel cold. So cold in contrast to the heat of the boiler room. And the blood previously soaking your clothing is gone. Your clothes are gone completely. No, not gone, replaced. but your mind had to struggle to grasp that word in its flurry of panic and confusion. Your clothes had been replaced by a coral-colored dress, a golden necklace hanging around your neck. The clothing feels somehow cursed. You spun in a slow circle, taking in the hallways around you, spotting the towering silhouette of a man at the end of the hallway. You knew who it was long before the voice trailed down the hallway, almost like water. "YN?" Brahm's voice cooed, forcing a shiver down your spine. "Why did you lie, YN?" Something in the air seemed completely off. Brahms took a lumbering step forwards, his green eyes glowing in the low light of the few LED lights working overhead. Another step, as he tilts his head. "You aren't allowed to lie to me, YN." Normally, Brahms' voice is like silk, calming, soothing, loving, but now it felt more like smooth, fluid acid. That's against the rules. It burnt. Almost. You knew this wasn't Brahms. It was instinct. You spun on your heel and sprinted off down the hallways. "Don't leave me, YN!" Subconsciously, your legs carried you towards your room, Brahms' pursuing footsteps echoing after you. You slammed into the door, fingers curling around the door handle and shaking it with all your strength, but it held strong and was locked tightly. "Shit!" You scream at yourself in your mind, and continue down the hallway, vaguely remembering this route to bring you to the activity rooms. You try to glance over your shoulder, spotting a fleeting shadow in a vibrant colored eye, a lime green that sprung tears of fear in your eyes. You breathe loudly as you take a sharp left, not knowing where to go, but just knowing that you need to move, keep running, get away. The lights overhead go out with a boom and a whir of electricity, pitching you in total darkness while the emergency lights struggle to boot up. In the total darkness, you feel your panic spill over along with your tears as you force your legs to continue despite the lack of light. You're bathed in a flash of blinding red. As the lights erupt, you catch a sight of your clothing. It's changed again. Now you wore a long leather cloak, a hood tucked over the top of your head. You looked up again, almost not catching that your path had been entirely cut off. "No!" You spun around to run the other way, and a wall had sprung up there as well. You were caged in, your surroundings shifting whenever you look away until all four walls, the roof, the floor were a white plush, padded, solitary. This is where Danny would have been taken after his episode. "Nice for you to drop by, sweetheart." His voice is all around you, dripping with insanity. You catch a flicker of black to your left and spin to face it, but it disappears as soon as it comes to full view. "I've been waiting." You spin again. Another flicker of black, gone as soon as you focus on it. "Where the hell am I?" you demand, forcing your tears to subside and trying to seem strong, confident, capable of battling off a trained killer. "Let me out of here!" Your voice cracks and wavers, a hopelessness blooming in your stomach as it does. You run to the door of the padded cell, slamming your fist against the cushioned surface and letting out a scream for help. If you don't shut up, I'll get you like the bitch you are." The voice is right behind you, and as you spin around, you're shoved, pressed against the cushioned door by a man with emerald eyes. "Why are you trying to leave, Miss YN?" It's Brahms again, not Danny, and his gentle hand presses it to your cheek, a thumb brushing away a tear. His presence is safe, almost, but you can see the signs that are confirming that this is an imposter. His eyes are not emerald green, but lime green, a cross between his and Danny's yellow. This is a demon, a beast, a nightmare. With a result growl, you crane your neck and fasten your teeth around Brahms' thumb, hearing his scream of pain wavering between Brahms' high voice, Danny's spine-chilling voice, and a low voice and scratchy like that of a demon. You shove with all of your weight, forcing Brahms backwards and almost to the ground. The door swings open all on its own with a screech, opening to concrete, a sidewalk leading up to a dark, decayed home. The forest around it stands tall and dark. cobwebs hanging in your path. You swallow your fear and disgust, shoving forwards as the beast behind you recovers with a growl of annoyance. Sweetheart, it purrs, Danny's voice now. Let's talk about this, Strike a deal? A bargain? Fuck you, you screech, swinging your arms as you push the thickening cobwebs aside. They drag and cling to your hair, face, arms, but you go closer and closer to the house with every step. Frantic and panicked, Danny is behind you. You can hear him, walking quickly but not running. You reach the porch of the house. The wooden boards of the porch are almost all missing, a thin beam of the slats making a narrow path to the front door. It's held ajar, and you slam it open, stumbling onto the solid ground. The cobwebs are lighter here, but still thick and choking. You slam the door behind you as Danny shoots an arm through, letting out a groan as it gets caught in the door's path. It waves, propping through the air for you, and you grab a chair, forcing it underneath the door's handle. Its feet sink into the slightly damp ground like anchors as Danny struggles to free his arm and pursue you. You dive into a room on the right, shutting the door behind you as silently as possible. This house is a cage, a death trap. You have to escape before Danny gets in. The room you had slipped into was dark and dingy. Pictures littering the walls of all sorts of gruesome things, which most of the pictures of you dead or dying in a horribly bloody manners. You force your eyes to the ground and run into a second room, a bathroom. A window perches above the toilet, high and boarded off. You hear the door chattering to bits at the chair chattering to bits at the door. Damaged wood snapped into bits as the door was rammed open. You stand on the toilet, gripping the boards and snapping them off with all your might. They crack, snapping, and you use one end of the wood to smash out the window. You force yourself up, crawling through the small gap as glass slices up your arms and stomach. You stumble over the side, landing shoulder first into a swath of tangly dead bushes. Come on, hun, don't go running. I'm getting impatient. He's just on the other side of the window. You can hear his leather-clad hand curling against the sill. You leap to your feet, pain in your arms, legs, head, and you force your way out of the thrown bush and onto the flat ground. The forest will have to hide you. A sprint takes over, your breathing slipping away, but you run, faster, always faster as Danny slinks through the undergrowth in your wake. He is silent. You lost track of him. But you power forwards and pray he'll lose you. You know you're naive for thinking you can outrun him, and you've proven right as he leaps in your path. You don't have time to stop as you directly hit him. He locks you up against his chest as you struggle and thrash for escape. Gotcha, bitch, he hisses, his yellow eyes glinting with glee and insanity. He throws you to the ground, his weight on top of yours, straddling your waist. I'm sure this is very reminiscent, Danny hums, his hands dancing up your sides. Get off of me! You won't let this happen again. With all of your weight, you throw Danny off of you, and with a scream you lift your hand, slamming it downwards and onto the wound in your side. The pain is overwhelming, scorching, making your vision twist and darken. You grow cold, and shudder as you dig your pointer and middle finger into your wound as deep as you can bring yourself to. Wake the fuck up, YN. Your vision goes dark, and you know that you've won this battle. I'll see you later then, YN. Jesus fucking Christ. Oh my gosh. That was the longest, most intense chapter that we haven't... Like, we've had already our intense chapter. Definitely reading this. But damn. Now, I know you guys might know who this person is. Well, demon is. But no spoiling for the ones who don't know. Please do not comment who this person is, because people will figure it out. But keep it to yourself, children, until the next video in this series. But anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think is gonna happen to YN next in the futuristic chapter of this series. Also, who do you think YN encountered being in this nightmare dream quote unquote. Quote unquote. If you, this is like an answer that you don't comment this answer. Just, keep it to yourself, because I know people will probably like, I know, honeys, I know who it is, but I'm not gonna say it because I don't want to spoil it, because it's too good to spoil. Okay, it's too good. But now returning to my other thought about Hannibal. Hannibal, I like that he tried to comfort us and give us advice, and also like kind of like understood exactly what happened, because he has good ass ears, and he is a psychiatrist. We must remember that he is a former psychiatrist, and he know the hell what he knows what he's doing. You know what I'm saying? But I'm glad that he's trying to comfort us. But I feel like he is right that we should tell them, because hiding it is not a good idea, because that won't help us really. Like, that'll just make us because that'll just make us hide more, because they like, we know they care for us. You know what I'm saying? But what I would suggest, whenever you're talking to them about that, just let them know that the guy's dead and he was killed by Michael. Then they'll be a little bit more calm, I hope. Anywho, y'all better be doing this, because this is really juicy. I think I deserve it for... Oh my gosh, I think I deserve it. Come on now. Y'all don't think I deserve a like, subscribe, and maybe turning on the notification bell for more amazing videos? Come on now. I deserve at least a like, But anyways, sadly, your girl's gotta go, because this is a long chapter, and I'm gonna have to painfully go through and edit it. Yeah, but I do it for you guys, because I love you guys. But anyways, your girl's gotta go. Bye and peace.